Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Christina from Hourwood Home. As you can tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be taking you along as I sew my winter wardrobe. I've already done a couple pieces, but I didn't think to film it, and I thought you guys might like to see what goes into my dressmaking and skirt making process. So I'm starting off with this pink stretchy fabric. And I knew that I wanted to make a dress similar to one I'd previously made using a store-bought pattern, but I didn't really like the pattern. Just the pieces were a little bit odd, the construction was odd, but I liked the overall shape of the finished dress. So what I did was actually just traced the finished dress onto my fabric. I made sure to leave seam allowance space. And since this dress had attached sleeves, I just had to mark the set-in sleeve area. I apologize if you hear any weird noises in the background of this video. Usually I film in my office/sewing room, but this time I'm sitting in my dining room and my dog is just kind of wandering around doing her thing. So you might hear some weird dog noises, but it's all good. People seem to like seeing my dog in videos anyways. Alright, so back to the tracing. As I said, I'm just laying the dress down and tracing out each section of the garment. So this dress is going to have a bodice front and back, a skirt front and back, and 2 sleeve pieces. So because both fabrics are stretchy, the one that I'm using for the new dress and the old dress, I know that the new fabric will fit the way that I want if I just trace the old dress. So I am leaving some space around all the edges because it will need to be sewn, and that space will get, that space is good for the seam allowance so that I know the dress fits the way that I want it to. So I'm going to speed up most of this video because it's pretty self-explanatory, I think, and it's already over an hour long just with the raw footage, and I don't want it to be that long for the final cut. So let's speed this up a bit, shall we? Something to consider when using a knit fabric that's stretchy is if it has a pattern, you have to consider where you're marking your pieces so that your pattern is the same direction. For example, since this one was stripy, I wanted to make sure the bodice stripes and the skirt stripes were all going the same direction. I wasn't too concerned about lining up the pattern necessarily, just as long as the stripes were in the same direction. But also with stretchy fabric, sometimes they only stretch in one direction. So that's going to dictate where you might want to put your pattern pieces, your dress pieces. I chose to have the stretch go across the dress side to side because I think that's just a bit more comfortable. But that's definitely something to consider when you're purchasing fabric or looking to purchase fabric. Ideally, fabric with two-way stretch, where it stretches in all directions, would be the best in my opinion, but single stretch is fine as long as you make note of that when you're cutting out your garment pieces. So now I'm going to be tracing out the sleeve. This is a little piece that I've made for a short sleeve. It's just the template I use for all my dresses, and then I just adjust the length as I need to. I think I copied this from an older sewing pattern I had, but I can't remember. If you want to get a sleeve pattern, you can just look for one online. There's lots of options that let you just print from home, and then you might just have to adjust the length of the sleeve depending on your preferences. What I like to do with cutting out sleeves, and pretty much anything, is to draw out the shape that I want, find the exact middle, cut along up until the middle point, and then fold the piece onto itself so that I can line up the edges and have a perfectly symmetrical piece, which is what I'm doing here. That way I know that it's going to fit properly and that it'll be nice and even when I'm sewing the seams up later. It is around Christmas time when I was filming this video, which is why I'm wearing a Christmas sweater. I don't know if that needs any explanation, but I thought I'd say it anyways. So when I make a dress, the first thing I do for sewing is to pin down the neckline front and back, and then I sew that seam both the front and the back. Next, I will attach the bodice at the shoulder seams, making sure the right sides are together, sewing them right sides together. And then after that, I will do the sleeves, hem the sleeves, and then pin those in place onto the bodice and sew up along under the arm of the sleeve and then down the side of the bodice. I'm sure there's other ways of doing this, but this is just what works best for me. If you have another method for doing the sleeves, that's totally fine. Alright, so my camera battery died, and I wasn't able to show you this part on camera, but I wanted to talk about how I put in the pockets. So right now for the skirt of my dress, I have the right sides together, and I'm doing just interior pockets, not patch pockets. I don't know if this is the right way or the best way to do pockets, but this is what I've done and it seems to work all right. So I'm using a different fabric for the pockets. I didn't want to use the same as the skirt fabric. And what I've done is, I'm going to try to explain it the best I can, but hopefully you can kind of see what I've done here. So this side of the corduroy fabric for the pocket, it's the side that's got the high pile on it, the little lines. That's what I want to be the inside of my pocket. I want, when I put my hand into the pocket, I want to feel that corduroy texture. So I've put that side of the pocket against the outside of the skirt. I've done that on both sides, the front and the back, and the left and the right side of the skirt. Then I'm going to sew from here down to here. Do the same on the other side, the front and the back, and on the opposite side. But I'm just going to sew along this edge, okay? Then I'm going to put, excuse me, I'm going to put the skirt front and back together, line them up nicely, and sew up here down to where the pocket starts, and then from here where the pocket ends down to the bottom hem. I do not want to sew over this, otherwise I'll sew my pockets shut. So then in theory, once I turn the skirt right sides out, this will be a nice finished edge that will look nice and smooth. There won't be any stitching. And then I can sew the pockets together along this part. So we'll get to that part later. It's kind of poor lighting right now because it's evening and it's dark, but I just wanted to film that little demonstration before I forget to do it tomorrow when I continue sewing in the light of day. As you can see, the bodice of the dress is finished. Well, finished in the sense that the neckline is hemmed. I'm going to be doing the skirt in this bit, but I'm going to speed this up because it's pretty straightforward. Now that the skirt is finished, I'm going to continue working on the bodice by setting the sleeves in. I've already gone ahead and hemmed the bottom of the sleeve, and I'm not going to make a very long explanation about how to set in the sleeves because I have talked about that in a previous video, and also there's probably much better tutorials for doing that since this is not a tutorial anyways. It's just a sew along with me kind of video, but you can kind of see what I'm doing, and I will put a link up across the top of the screen for my other dressmaking video where I think I show this in a bit more detail. I didn't film the part where I gathered the skirt across the waist or when I attached it to the bodice because, as I said, this is not a sewing tutorial, and I did talk about that in my other dressmaking video, which I linked previously. But I wanted the skirt to be a little bit gathered so that it would fit the bodice nicely, and I didn't make the skirt as wide as the bodice because that would be much too narrow and I wouldn't have a lot of freedom of movement and it would just be clingy and not what I'm going for. So I'm going to be sewing the bodice and the skirt together, taking out the pins as I go, just using a regular straight stitch. So the dress is finished being sewn, but there are some things that I'm going to change about it. Let me just flip the camera around and kind of zoom in that area. All right, so first up is the neckline. It's fine, but I don't know if you can tell on the dress form, it's pretty wide across here. So that means I just cut it too wide. This fabric does have a fair bit of stretch and it's pretty heavy, so I think that contributed to the wide neckline. So what I'm going to do, I also have an issue with the sleeves being a little too long, and because the neckline is wide, the shoulder seam kind of sits a little further down on my arm than I would like. So what I think I'm going to do, first of all, is turn this inside out and just sew another seam here to bring it up like that. And then I'm also going to go inside and just sew this neckline closed a little bit more, and that'll fix the width issue. But it is a little bit lower than I want as well. So because this is a winter dress, I kind of want it more covered up here. So what I think I'm going to do is get a different piece of fabric, maybe a pink one, to kind of try to match the pink in here. And I'm just gonna sew one across like this to kind of look like I've got a layering top underneath. But apart from that, and apart from cutting some loose threads and giving it a good wash, I think this dress is done. I really like the pockets. They turned out exactly as I hoped. Let me move my mannequin here and push those sleeves out of the way. I don't know how well that's showing up on camera, but they are awesome. The corduroy is exactly where I wanted it to be. And who doesn't love a dress with pockets, right? If the dress looks like it's crooked or uneven, it is the dress form. It's crooked, it doesn't sit straight, so anything I put on the mannequin ends up looking a little bit crazy. But anyways, that is that. I will show you this dress later. Once it's all finished, I'll do a little modeling of it and you can see how it fits that way. To raise the neckline, I'm going to be using a contrasting shade of pink in just a different fabric. I've already gone ahead and tried the dress on and marked where I'd like the neckline to be. And now I'm going to cut a small piece of fabric so it's easier to fit inside the dress instead of stuffing all of that in. I'm just going to cut a piece and then I'll trace the shape of the neckline. Next I will sew it across the top so that it's got a nice finished edge. And then I can sew that into the dress just using the original stitching from the neckline hem as my guide so that it all lines up and it looks intentional. Gone ahead and hemmed the raw edge of this little modesty panel. I've hemmed it here and then I've pinned it in place I only hemmed this edge, not the raw edge down here, but I've pinned it in place along the neckline, and I made sure that there was extra fabric so that I could catch it by going along this original seam for the original neckline hemming. And if you are doing this maybe on a dress or a top that you bought from the store, if you don't have a sewing machine, you can still do this. You could just sew along here by hand carefully, but since I have a machine and since I have the same thread that I have along here, I'm just going to do that quickly by machine, going carefully, making sure that I'm following this original stitch line and making sure that I catch the fabric underneath, as well as making sure that I take all the pins out so I don't sew over them and wreck my machine. So here's the finished dress. Overall, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I like the panel across the top and taking in the shoulder seams and the sleeve a little bit definitely helped bring that up and make it not as loose and sloppy. I kind of wish I had made the dress a little bit longer, but that's okay. I still like the way this looks, and I like how the pockets turned out, but they are a little bit bulky, and I made them a little too small because they are the size to fit my old phone, and my new phone is quite a bit bigger, but overall I still like how it looks. It's really comfortable to wear. I've worn it a few times, and it's just a nice winter dress. There's definitely things that I'd change if I used this fabric again, but considering how it was my first time using it, I think I did okay. And I'm considering maybe getting this fabric in a couple other colors to make some more dresses for winter. I hope that you enjoyed seeing how I made this dress, and make sure that you are subscribed to my channel if you want to see the other parts of my winter wardrobe. I'll be posting a few more videos showing how I make a couple other pieces. Thank you so much for watching this video. Feel free to give it a thumbs up or to leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.